So today we're going to analyze the short Pixar film called Borrowed Time. Many of you have seen this before, and that's actually a good thing for what we're about to do. If you haven't watched it, please pause this video, go back to Canvas, and watch the entire 6-minute film before you go through the analysis of it. This is important for a couple of reasons. The first is because the first time you watch something, you're really just going for the story, what is going to happen, and then after that, what happens next. And sometimes you don't really get all the details and nuances that go into making a story. The second reason is that it's really hard to come up with a theme for a story until you know the entire story. So to begin, a literary analysis is where you look at all the parts and see how they add up to the whole, which in this case is the theme of the story. I chose this video because it has nearly all the story elements that we've been learning about this quarter. It'll be a lot of information packed into 6 minutes, but will hopefully make it clear how to analyze a story. The theme of this film is the importance of finding closure and self-forgiveness for something that you did in your past that you regret, so you can move on with your life. So exposition. In the opening scenes, we immediately know the setting. That's the when and where of the story. It's clearly in the past, and it's in Western America. We can tell this by the landscape, the lighting, the dried up bones on the edge of the cliff, and the man's clothing. I think the author chose this setting because it puts the story at a time and place when such a tragic accident as what is about to unfold could logistically happen, and reinforces the fact that there's no one to help the father or the child. This will also require the child to carry the guilt for his actions for his entire life. There are no therapists, no kindly police officers, and no education or self-help to help him get a true perspective on what has happened and eliminate his guilt for it. Most stories are told linearly. That means from beginning to end. This story actually starts in the middle and then quickly changes into a flashback mode as we learned about what happened on the trip with his father many years ago. It makes sense because the real story, the real conflict, isn't the accident, but the fallout that he's dealing with many years later. So the watch is a symbol, and this is where we see it for the first time. And we don't initially know that it has a picture of the father and his son inside of it. We do understand the context in which it was given as a gift to the boy. It would seem that this is a coming of age moment. The boy is finally mature enough to go with dad on this obviously very dangerous journey, and the father's using the trip as a time to bond their relationship together. Point of view. Films are inherently told in third person, with the camera becoming the narrator. The use of flashbacks and the overwhelming grief of the main character, however, really makes this feel like a third-person limited storytelling. The viewer is inside of the head of this man and can experience what he is thinking and feeling as he thinks it and feels it. Conflict. Most stories have more than one conflict. In a film, the external conflict is always the most exciting part. Here it is the bandit chase, the cliff, the inadvertent killing of his father. But the real story of this film is the internal conflict that the man is suffering from. The man is wrestling with regret and guilt, and it is leading him to make a devastating life decision. The inciting incident is something that happens that disrupts the equilibrium of the story, meaning everything is just going to continue as normal except this one thing happens. In this case, it's the wagon wheel hitting the rock and breaking apart. Without that incident, the bandit robbery would have played out very differently, and regardless of who won or lost, we would have had a very different story than what we had. The situational irony is just brutal in this film. It is situational irony that the father is killed by his son with the very gun that was likely meant to protect his son. It is ironic that the watch with the lost picture of his father is what ultimately saves the man from taking his own life at the edge of that cliff.
Characterization is up next. We learned a lot about this guy. First, his looks. He's clearly at least middle-aged, but seems somewhat unkempt and hasn't shaved for a while, at least in the opening shots of the film. He's a sheriff and has the badge, and that brings all sorts of questions to mind. How did he become a sheriff? What experiences has he had? Why is he so very unhappy? He's limping, so we know that he's had a rough go at life, or even possibly an injury. And the effects on others. When the first flashback occurs, we get some answers to how other people think of him when he was young. His dad was also a sheriff, so there's a clear connection there. His dad is proud of him, as evidenced by the gift, and has faith in his son's abilities to help with the bandit. We can see that by his dad handing him the reins. It's almost a coming-of-age moment gone horribly wrong. Actions. The man is trying hard. He wants to help. He wants to do what's right to help his father, and then somehow make his mistake up to his father by becoming a sheriff himself. His actions cannot compensate for his internal conflict. Ultimately, his love for his father and his desire to make his dad proud is greater than his self-loathing, and that is what saves him from taking his own life at the end. At the brink of death, when he finds that watch, he's able to find the self-forgiveness that has eluded him for so long. Did you notice they didn't tell you the title, at least not until the end? Why is that? It does create some suspense, but more importantly, it allows the reader to make up their own mind about what the message is, what the theme is, without directing their ideas too much. So the title is Borrowed Time. Authors choose their title, of course, on purpose. What does this mean? This title is an expression, and it usually means to be waiting for an event that will happen at an uncertain but inevitable time. It immediately asks the viewer this question: what will happen and when? It fits the theme because if the main character doesn't find closure for the event of his childhood, it is clear that his life cannot continue.